And welcome everybody to another episode of TED Talk Stamps. I am your host, Ted the Talking Stamp Collector. And as you notice by the thumbnail for this video, this is episode number 100. Yay! And I thought for this episode I would just do another installment of Philatelic Tidbits. Just a few short stories that don't really warrant a whole episode on their own. But first, a little bit of philatelic news. This past week, November 8th to be exact, another inverted Jenny C3A postage stamp went up for auction by the Robert A. Siegel Auction Company. And those of you who have been waiting for prices to come down a little before you shell out for one, well, you'll have to wait a little bit longer because you'll be disappointed in these results. This stamp set a new record for the price of a single U.S. stamp. This inverted Jenny is the finest example known of the 100 that could possibly exist. And just this past year, or last year anyways, in September and October, the stamp got certified twice, once from PSE and once later again from the Philatelic Foundation. And both organizations graded the stamp at extra fine to superb 95 and mint never hinged to boot. There are two other C3As that have graded at 95, but those were both hinged copies. So this mint never hinged 95 is the finest inverted Jenny out there. Now the stamp had a pre-auction estimate of $1.5 to $2 million. And as you can see here, it got hammered down at $1.7 million. And after a buyer's commission is added in, the total price was $2,006,000. It was purchased by a 76-year-old stamp collector named Charles Hack, who's had his eye on this stamp ever since he was a young boy. And he considers this the holy grail of postage stamps. And I missed it by just that much. There are many cases where a stamp artist has been known to put secret messages or include secret images within his stamp design. The famed engraver Czesław Słania was well known to hide family names within his engravings. And if you haven't seen my episode on Czesław Słania, you can find it right here. Maybe here. I don't know where it's going to show up. Now, when Romania issued its first 6 airmail stamps, World War I was still a fresh memory, and the artist who designed this stamp found the perfect opportunity to commemorate one of Romania's most beloved heroes of the Great War. Here's a picture of the first 6 airmails. They all feature the same design, depicting a SPAD S-33 aircraft, complete with registration number. Now, the International Convention for assigning registration numbers for aircraft was that Romania used the letters C-R to begin the registration and then filled out with 3 more. When trying to decide which letters to fill out the registration numbers on this aircraft, it didn't take the designer long to come up with the letters AIU, and taken all together, the registration spelled out the last name of Vasile Craiu, a young man of only 22 who distinguished himself as a courageous and skilled pilot during World War I. Craiu commanded his own fighter squadron and quickly distinguished himself as an excellent aerobat and a fierce dogfighter. During one battle in August of 1917, he completed 30 flight missions in less than 52 hours, and he shot down his first enemy plane on November 17, 1917. Unfortunately, just 1 year into his storied career, and at the age of 23, He lost his life in August 1918 while performing an aerobatic stunt at low altitude. For his exceptional service during the war, Craiu was awarded several medals, including the Mihai Viteazul, or Michael the Brave Order from Romania, as well as the Star of Romania Order and the French Croix de Guerre. And thanks to an admiring stamp designer, his name will continue to live among many people who would not have otherwise heard of him. Benjamin Franklin once said, "In this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes." And of course, everyone hates paying taxes, whether you live in the U.S. or Great Britain or Italy. Most people will do everything in their power, either legally or illegally, to avoid paying their taxes. And as it turns out, many Italians take the latter route. Italy has taken tax evasion to the level of high art, surpassed only by the country of Greece in the amount of tax evasion that occurs. And this has been a problem for over 200 years. In 1814, the first tax collector of the Kingdom of Italy, Giuseppe Prina, was mobbed inside his home, thrown out the window, and dragged through the streets before he was stabbed to death. Talk about a thankless job, huh? Well, in the intervening years, it hasn't gotten much better. In 2012, 2 bombs exploded in front of the revenue office in Livorno, and a few days later, another revenue office in another city was mobbed, which required calling out the riot police. What prompted all this activity? The new Prime Minister, Mario Monti, had announced he was going to clamp down on tax evasion. In 1954, the Postal Service was brought in to kind of help out the situation as far as they could. And it's a funny solution if you ask me. The post office said, "No problem, we can fix this." And they released these stamps. Half of the image area is taken over by text from Article 53 of the Italian Constitution saying, quote, "Everyone is required to contribute to public expenses based on their ability to contribute." That should do the trick. And they sat back and they waited for the revenues to roll in. And they waited. And they waited. 1955 rolled around and they decided, the people, they need a little more urging. So they issued another stamp with different text saying, in effect, "We're waiting." And they kept waiting for another 2 decades. In 1977, they realized the people, they need another reminder. This time 2 stamps, but both bearing the same message as before. Everyone is required to contribute to public expenses based on their ability to contribute. Frankly, I think the government will be waiting until the cows come home. Today, tax evasion is rife as ever. In 2013, 200 billion euros in tax revenue went uncollected in Italy. That amounted to 27% of the country's gross domestic product. I think what Benjamin Franklin might have meant was, in this world, nothing is certain except death and tax evasion. When I was a comic collector, it was always fun to get an issue that had what's called an infinity cover. This is one that would depict a character holding a comic book with the same cover on which it appears. And of course, there would be another copy of that cover on that cover, and so on to infinity and beyond. These are called recursive images, which simply means that an image reoccurs within itself in the image. This is also known as the Drost effect, after its first known use in 1904 on a label for Drost cocoa. Now, the Drost effect has also occurred on postage stamps over the years to varying degrees of effectiveness. And I first learned of its use on the United States Special Delivery Stamp of 1954. It depicts a mailman's hand handing over a letter to a woman's hand, and the letter bears a stamp with the same design as the real stamp. Other examples can be found on this one from Austria, showing Cupid playing postman with a letter bearing a stamp of our stamp. Benin issued a stamp in 1984 for the UPU Congress, where the envelope in the bottom right corner bears the same stamp. Great Britain issued a stamp showing birds carrying letters in their beaks circling a postbox, and the lower right bird is carrying a letter with the same stamp. In 1967, Italy implemented the use of postal codes and issued this stamp to publicize the fact, and it shows a postcard franked with a stamp of itself. In 1974, Jersey issued a set of 4 stamps for the centenary of the UPU. The third value in the set has a pretty nice recursive image of a letter bearing the self-same stamp being dropped into a postbox. Netherlands issued a recursive stamp for their 1979 Europa issue, though it takes a bit of close observation to really make it out. The best example, however, goes to Nepal, who issued a stamp for the 1981 Philatelic exhibition that leaves no doubt about the Drost effect. This is a wonderful recursive image in the best tradition of the comic book's infinity covers. If you know of any other stamps with recursive images like this, let me know in the comments below. It seems men have always had a thing about women with facial hair, especially one who can sport a good beard. In the last century, it wasn't unusual to find circuses that had sideshow acts just telling you to step right up and see the bearded lady. And just as infinity covers from comic books spilled over into stamps, this affinity for bearded ladies also spilled over into stamps. Accidentally, of course. In 1849, France's first issue featured a depiction of the goddess Ceres. Well, on Scott number 8, the 1 franc vermilion value, something happened with the die along the way, and this was the end result. Ceres is definitely sporting a little goatee called a chin puff. Only 2 mint copies of this stamp are known to exist, and I couldn't find any valuation for it anywhere. Although, to give you an idea, the basic stamp, Scott number 8, has a catalog value in mint condition of over $90,000. So there's no telling what the value of these 2 mint copies would be. But you might want to check your Kilaware junk bag just to make sure you're not overlooking any good fortune. So that brings us to the end of episode number 100 of TED Talk Stamps. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I hope you'll subscribe and hit the like button. And until next time, this is Ted the Talking Stamp Collector wishing you all happy stamping.